loves and cares for us, watches over us, and calls us to follow. Amen. When I sat down this week to prepare this sermon, my intention was to focus on the theophany, that is, on the encounter of Moses with the divine, that is so central to today's passage. I wanted to explore the desire for a direct experience of God, which Moses expresses, and on our own longings to be known, to know God, to know the divine presence in our days and in our world. That is, I wanted to talk about spirituality and divine encounter. And then, of course, I would give a little plug for the Wisdom Center and the upcoming speaker who's talking about the sacred body, which is core to our spirituality. However, as usual, when I came to a text with a preconceived notion, I found my expectations challenged by the unexpected twists and turns of this narrative, and by its intersections with contemporary life and current events. It's very easy to hear this narrative as about Moses and his desire to see God, because that's central. It's there in the text. And yes, and but, this narrative is much more complicated than that. For while we often read this as a story about an individual, in context, it's a revelation about divine commitment to presence, to grace, and to faithfulness in the midst of community unfaithfulness. Behind the passage is a deeper question. Where is God in the face of human inconsistency? Will God remain present, or will God withdraw from God's people? And it's the potential of that loss of God's presence that drives this story. We can see this if we step back and see it in context of the chapters that come before and after. That is, the story of the golden calf, of the idolatry of the people, and the challenge that this presents to Moses and to God. The children of Israel are gathered at the foot of Mount Sinai. Moses, their leader, is off on the mountain conversing with God for a long time. Uses the symbolic 40 days and 40 nights for the lengthy time. The people are anxious. They are afraid. They ask Aaron to make some gods for them, someone to take care of them. God, of course, gets upset, tells Moses what is going on, and says, "Look what your people are doing." And God is ready to throw up their metaphorical hands and abandon them. Moses steps in and argues on behalf of the people, and God changes God's mind. But the matter isn't really resolved yet for God from God's side. So various things happening, and then at the beginning of today's reading, God tells Moses that it's time for the people to move on, and oh yeah, this time there's going to be an angel going with you. Moses is having none of it. He continues his argument with the divine on behalf of the people. Hang on here, I'm supposed to lead these people, and who is going with me? You and I have this intimate relationship. You know my name. You say I have found favor in your sight, and you say, what? This nation is your people. If your presence doesn't go with me and your people, how will anyone know This is a quarrel between friends and lovers. And it's about the impossibility of success for these people unless something changes on God's side. God says, "Oh, okay, I will do the very thing you've asked, for you have found favor in my sight, and I do know you by name." And then Moses pushes the ask. He says, "Show me your glory, I pray." Now here's where my original sermon went off the rails. For the desire of Moses to know God, to understand God's ways, to see God's glory, isn't about his personal spirituality. It's nestled within this larger narrative of his love and desire for his people. His desire for these crazy, disobedient, bumbling, grumbling people. So this isn't just about Moses deciding that he wants to see God. It's about the bigger picture and what he needs if he is to see this impossible journey, this impossible task through to its end. Moses needs to know. He needs to experience the divine presence in order to trust that God is going to be with him in what he goes forward. So it isn't about Moses' personal faith. He is seeking something that will give him confidence that the divine presence goes with the people, that this will distinguish them from the other nations, that there is hope for the outcome. He needs to see God's glory, even if it is only God's backside. And the divine acquiesces, declaring, "I will make all my goodness pass before you, and I will proclaim before you the name, the unspeakable name that we translate as the Lord." The divine agrees to Moses' requests. He agrees to manifest in a tangible way. "You will see my goodness. I will name myself." Remember the first call of Moses, the burning bush, and Moses is like, "Who are you, and how do I know I can trust you?" And what happens is the divine names the divine self. "I am who I am," or "I will be who I will be." And then, now, in this passage, the divine says, "This is who I am, that's my name," and the divine expands upon that name. Who is God? "I will be gracious to whom I will be gracious. I will show mercy on whom I will show mercy." It becomes part of God's name. Moses is going to see the glory of the God whose name, whose very identity is mercy and grace, who does not reject the people, whose ongoing presence will make it possible for Moses to lead the people. Rabbi Sachs views this chapter as an immense mystery, a mystery that frames the shape of Jewish spirituality. He sees this as a spirituality that recognizes both the sheer immensity and mystery of the divine, yet celebrates the closeness and intimacy of God and humanity. Moses knows and sees the ineffable God, and Moses merely glimpses the back. Sachs, too, places this encounter within the framework of Moses' leadership call. He says, Moses was in effect saying to God, "What the people need is not for me to be close to them. I'm just a human, here today, gone tomorrow. But you are eternal. You are their God. You need to be close to them. That's what they need. Throughout the book of Exodus, Moses is a mediator. He stands between the people and the terrifying God of the plagues of fire and smoke. The divine is at arm's length, with Moses between God and humanity. When the people try to make their own God, one that can be seen and domesticated and be actually present to them, it brings disaster. What they need is for the presence of God to dwell in their midst. Moses, too, wants to see God, but recognizes this is not something over which he has control. He deals directly with the divine. He argues his case on the basis of relationship and identity. You know my name, so let me know you. Be present to me. Stay with me. Stay with us. By the end of Exodus, that is what happens. God will be present. God will dwell in their midst. God's presence, God's glory descends upon the tabernacle, the tent where they meet. So ultimately, the answer of the divine to the problem of the golden calf is that Moses sees a glimpse of God's glory, and the presence of God dwells in the middle of the people in the tabernacle. The answer to the divine problem of the golden calf isn't rejection. It is a response of bringing to them what they really need. Centuries later, the author of the Gospel of John reflects upon the incarnation in this way. He chooses the language of tabernacle to describe the embodiment of the divine, the presencing of God's glory in the world, God with us. It's the same trajectory. The divine is both beyond understanding and is present with us and within us. We know and are known by God both individually and corporately. In light of recent global events, this passage becomes fraught with challenges. Where is God now? Where is God present? What does it mean for a people, a nation, to consider themselves the people of God, the location of God's presence? What happens when those that believe that, the three Abrahamic faiths, Jewish, Christian, Muslim, meet together in war? Where is God? Where is God when humans fail? How do we make this our way through this? In despair, but without despairing. I think one answer from today's reading, the story of Moses in the cleft of the rock, is to imitate Moses and wrestle with God, to argue it out, to demand to know God, to see God's ways, to glimpse God's glory, and to remind God of who God is. The one who shows mercy, the one who has grace upon fallen humanity, the one who calls for justice. I was trained in my early years to pray with Jesus, "Thy will be done." I think that is a true prayer, but it is not meant to be a passive prayer. It does not accept what is clearly contrary to the nature of God, who is gracious and merciful, who is long-suffering, who is love. It is contrary to the nature of the God who turns up in our midst as Jesus of Nazareth, who reveals that true nature as gracious and merciful, long-suffering and love. If God is the God of forgiveness and grace and mercy, that is what we need to be demanding of God in this world now. We need to stand with Moses and insist that God be present, that God be God, that God's holy names be true. And when we do so, we stand on solid ground, following in the footsteps of those who have gone before us, who have argued and wrestled with God, seeking healing and hope and goodness and beauty for this world. Amen.